Alrighty then, we have come to the last grouping of arguments that we're going to look at, the pairwise attribute arguments. I guess the main place I learned about this form of argumentation is from a book entitled The Impossibility of God, and by atheism book standards, this was actually a relatively good book. The largest section of this book is devoted to misconstruing the divine attributes and then showing how the caricaturized version of the attributes conflict with one another. This book is edited by Michael Martin. There's another book that he edited, The Improbability of God. I think one is a sequel to the other. I believe Impossibility came out and then Improbability. So you may be interested in checking those out. As is, this book, The Impossibility of God, is, I think, the best defense of atheism that I'm aware of in print. Any two attributes of God can potentially be used in the service of such a proof. Mayhaps it will prove helpful for us to first list the common attributes of God, that is, that people who believe in God say that God has, that he possesses. Alright, so one such list might be omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, benevolence, eternality, transcendence, immutability, and justice. We could add more, but these shall be sufficient for our purposes here. It is important to note that, strictly speaking, if attribute A is inconsistent with attribute B, that does not mean that God doesn't exist. God could still exist, but only possess attribute A and lack attribute B, for example. I'll spare you the combinatorics lecture, but there are a lot of such arguments that one could possibly construct, showing that one attribute is inconsistent with another, or attempting to show that. So I shan't deal with every conceivable possibility, merely hit what I consider to be the more salient ones. The first argument of this sort would be omnipotence versus omniscience. Premise 0. God is both omnipotent and omniscient. Premise 1. Since God is omniscient, he knows what will happen tomorrow. Premise 2. If God knows what will happen tomorrow, then, since he is omniscient, tomorrow's events cannot fail to happen. Premise 3. But if that's true, then God can't change what he knows shall happen tomorrow. And the conclusion number 4, therefore God is not omnipotent. The contradictions show that God cannot exist if he is both omnipotent and omniscient. Thus says the atheistic argument. Actually, this proof fails for similar reasons to the single attribute proofs we've already looked at, dealing with both omnipotence and omniscience taken alone in isolation from the other. The first observation is that it is not God's knowledge per se which locks in the unchangeability of what are now, presently, future contingent events. Secondly, we recall that omnipotence does not include the possibility of performing the logically incoherent, and to prevent what will happen is nonsensical. We cannot say that what will happen tomorrow shall not happen tomorrow. That's meaningless. This argument against God's existence is thus fallacious. The next argument, omnipresence versus transcendence. Premise 0, God is both omnipresent and transcendent. Premise 1, since God is omnipresent, he is here on earth. Premise 2, since God is transcendent, he is not here on earth. And the conclusion 3, the last two premises are blatantly contradictory, so there is no God. Take that, theists. Well, I'm afraid this argument is not sound either. Premises 1 and 2 are both ambiguous. What do we mean when we speak of God's presence, I would want to ask. God is a spiritual being and not a material being. Precisely speaking, then, God is not present anywhere, at least not in a physical sense. I do not know as I've read this anywheres, so it's probably wrong, but I think the best way to think of God's omnipresence is to say that he is omnipotent and omniscient. The definition of omnipresence that I'm proposing has nothing whatever to do with spatio-temporal locality. Rather, the term means neither more nor less than omnipotence plus omniscience. Under this interpretation of the word omnipresent, it's manifestly clear that omnipresence is compatible with transcendence. The next argument, okay, immutability versus omnipotence. 1. Since God is immutable, he lacks the power to change himself. 2. Since God lacks the power to change himself, he is not omnipotent. 3. But God is omnipotent. 4. God can't exist. God, like all other beings, cannot, and now I'm jumping right into the rebuttal here, the counter-argument. God, like all other beings, cannot change an essential part of his nature and still have that nature. So God can't temporarily lack omniscience, for example, and still be God. All things, then, are immutable in that sense. If there are accidental truths about God, things that are true of him but do not have to be true of him, then if they are really accidental, they could have been otherwise. God's omnipotence would surely cover the ability to have made those truths not to have obtained. If this violates the immutability of God, then God is not immutable. You see, some religious people take the immutability of God to unwarranted extremes, at least in my opinion. It's better to think of God being unchangeable with respect to his essence, with the fact that he is a living God as opposed to one that dies at some point, with respect to his love and what he has promised to do, what he has revealed that he will definitely do. These sorts of things God can't change with respect to those. If God never changes in these ways, that is enough, it seems, for him to qualify as immutable. Yet this kind of deity could consistently change accidental aspects of himself if he has any accidental aspects of himself. So this theistic disproof misrepresents immutability. Now, these arguments are good in the sense that they show, that they help people who do believe in God to get a clear idea of what these attributes mean, and this deepens our understanding of God. So that is a good aspect of these arguments. The next argument, omnipotence, omniscience, benevolence, and justice. Some have said that a problem arises when we take all of those together. Omnipotence, omniscience, benevolence, and justice, when we take them all together now. But this is just our old enemy, the problem of evil. And I'm stumbling over my words because I'm trying to complete a certain quantity by the end of the clock. I'm almost out of time. So I guess we'll have to end there for now and pick up the other arguments in the next video. So, as I said, we've already dealt with the problem of evil, so this one we can, immediately move on to the next one, which is benevolence versus justice, and that's actually the last one I have. Thank you. Shalom out.